Welcome to Codex History of Video Games. I'm Mike Coletta.
And I'm Tyler Osby.
And today we are continuing the book club of Console Wars by Blake J. Harris, and we'll be discussing chapters 30 through 34 today.
All right. I'm just still totally digging this book. We're like a little over halfway through it now, so if you're getting tired of Console Wars, too bad. There's still a bit left of it. But please buy this book because it's really good, and the storytelling style is really good, and we're not doing it justice here. But I do like talking about the events that happen in this book. So in chapter 30, which we left off about halfway through last time, I think, or did we do any of chapter 30 last week?
We didn't do any of chapter 30.
We did none of chapter 30 last week. Okay, good.
Yeah, we're going all in on chapter 30 today.
Okay, all right. So now I think we're in Nike territory, right? We're actually in San Francisco, which is that I don't remember where Nike's from.
Oregon.
Oh, they're from Oregon. That's right. So it's not Nike territory. But Kalinsky and the friends were meeting with Whedon and Kennedy, the advertising company that's responsible for Nike's Just Do It campaign, as well as a handful of other like extremely successful campaigns at Nike. So they're pretty interested in working for Sega, and that's pretty sick, right? Because they've done these great ad campaigns, and Sega's like, these guys got it in the bag. We can't wait to work with the people who did Nike's Just Do It campaign, which is like they still use that tagline, right? I think. Do they still use that tagline?
Yeah,
Probably.
I'm pretty sure they do. It's survived, man.
Yeah,
that is a thing that it's in the 80s is when they made that, I think.
Yeah. So Kalinsky is regaling the team of the story of Boca Raton, where they got the retailers to play ball with Sonic Tuesday. So they start by talking about the meeting with Toys R Us first, since if Toys R Us is in, everyone's in. If they're not, then it's probably going to be a bust. So when Richard Burns, vice president of sales, just tells Lazarus from Toys R Us that everyone else is in, he buys it, hook, line, and sinker, and says, just do it. And that's that, which is pretty funny. He's just like, he knows that if Toys R Us is on board, everybody else is on board. So he just says, hey, everybody else is on board to Toys R Us. And that makes them be on board. It's like a Ouroboros of like recursive, everyone is on board now, you know?
We're all on board.
We're all on board because we think everybody else is on board. If one person wasn't on board, then maybe nobody would be on board. It's very strange.
I feel like many good things and many horrible things have happened because of that.
Yeah, probably. So they tell the story. And then Kalinsky can't wait to see what Whedon and Kennedy have cooked up because it's down to them and this one other advertising agency who had done Levi's 501 jeans. But they're like, this is so cool. Wouldn't it be so cool to work with Nike or work with the people that worked with Nike? Wow, that would be so cool. But they're like entertaining other ad agencies for this whole Sonic Tuesday thing. And this advertising revamp was like the last part of the plan to revamp Sega because they had so much going for them at this point. Sonic was crushing it. The Genesis was super cool, and Sonic 2 was around the corner. And Sonic also had not one but two animated TV shows coming down the pipe. Do you remember this time, like a wonderful time period in the 90s where there were two animated Sonic TV shows, like separate shows?
Oh yeah, man! This is a magical time for that blue hedgehog.
I know.
Everyone loves it.
I watched them both. This wasn't like, they had one show and then it ended and then they had another show right away. Like, no, there was like one that was like a daily show and then a completely separate different show with a different storyline and like different characters that was like the Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah, it was so rad. Great time to be a kid. Great time. 10 out of 10. The 90s are pretty dope. Being a kid.
Yep, I agree. And so, like I said, I watched both of those shows, so I was a big fan.
Time out. Segue alert. Actually, no, not segue. Tangent alert.
Tangent alert.
Do you have a favorite Saturday morning cartoon from your childhood?
Oh, man. I mean, I loved Power Rangers.
That's a good one.
It might have been it. I mean, it's not a cartoon, I guess, but...
I was like, it was funny because I say I was really into like Pokemon, which is true, but there was this really weird Transformers show called Beast Wars that was like CGI, and I was
I remember that.
Sorry, that was a little tangent, but I just felt like I had to ask you now that we're talking. So.
Yeah, I think I'd have to go. Power Rangers isn't a cartoon, but it's like in the same...
It's the same vein. It
was the same idea. It was on Saturday mornings.
Yeah.
So they'd also lined up Sony as a partner for the Sega Cd, which was really important because CD games, like the biggest defining feature at the time was audio quality, which obviously could be CD quality. And Sony, being the massive conglomerate they are now and were then, but were much smaller then, they had a ton of recording artists that they would be able to make available to Sega's games through that partnership. Plus, the infamous PlayStation thing had happened with Nintendo, where they announced their partnership with Philips when Sony thought they were going to announce their partnership with Sony. It was very rude of Nintendo to do that, and so Sony was feeling pretty bad about that, and they were like, you know what, the best way to get back at Nintendo is let's partner with Sega. So they were like super on board with working with Sega on the Sega CD.
It's really weird to me because I'm going to talk about in a second how like family friendly working at Nintendo is, and they did stuff like this. You know, it's just so strange to me that they treated other companies so poorly sometimes, but yet they're like, we're the family friendly company. So,
I know, and they're so mean to other companies. They
so
still
mean.
are. I think.
I think so. They bullied me, is what I'm trying to tell you. Nintendo did. They actually did with their Wii Fit. It was really messed up.
Yeah,
it's like you're overweight and have poor balance. I'm like, thanks, Nintendo.
Dang, dude, that's really mean to just say that. Wow.
And it's weird is Minoru Arakawa sent that in an email. It wasn't even on the Wii Fit. It was just, he just randomly sent it to me.
Said it to Michael Coletta. Like, how did you get my email?
And he's like, I detected it through the Wii, through your feet.
Through your feet. The other thing that, the other direction that games on CD could go were like full motion video games. So like games that were basically like interactive movies where they would kind of act like large DVD menus where you could like, you would play the game and then you'd get really cool like cutscenes or whatever. Night Trap was one of those games. We talked a lot about that. So that was like the other thing that Sony was really excited about.
There's something about this podcast where we always come back to Night Trap.
I know, man. Night Trap, when we talk about game history, like Night Trap was a moment, and that game's not even good. That was like it was a moment in 90s history. Nobody's played it, but it's not good, but for some reason we all know about it.
I told you the last PAX I went to right before COVID, they had a republished boxed like hard copy of Night Trap that they were selling.
Wow. Yeah, you can get it on like Steam and stuff.
Like they were running out of it, of the hard copy. So many people were buying it. And I'm like, I don't even think people are going to play this. I think they just want this for their shelf. That's all they want.
It's just for the memes.
Which still, I mean, respect, because I've done stuff for the shelf. I mean, I love Lego, and that's pretty much all that is.
Well, you build it too. That's like that's a pursuit in and of itself. You got to put it together, and that's like kind of the point, right?
That's kind of the fun of it, yeah. To just turn on a YouTube video and just build something. Just pretend to be 7 again, and you don't have a care in the world. It's great. It's wonderful.
So this meeting is kind of funny because one of the other marketing companies that was vying for Sega's account was just down the street from Sega, like walking distance. They really liked those guys. Like they thought they were fun. They were really cool. But they were too new and they were too small and they didn't really have like a good track record of putting together really good marketing campaigns. They're called Goodby, Berlin, and Silverstein, and they sent them bottles of champagne during the meeting with Whedon and Kennedy because they knew they were there because they were nearby, which was pretty funny. But it wasn't really enough to make Kulinski and his friends like reconsider using them at this point in time. He was like, those jokesters, they're so fun. He's like, maybe one day, right? So after this meeting, it's like time for Summer CES, and Summer CES is old-timey E3. So because E3 didn't exist until like 3 or 4 years after this. So they went to CES knowing that Sonic Tuesday was a go. And so Harris talks about in the book, Blake J. Harris, the author, talks about how they were kind of able to play defense on this CES trip rather than offense because they'd already scored a ton of points before CES even started. They'd lined up all their retailers to get on board with Sonic Tuesday. They were in the process of getting their ad campaign together. Like they didn't have to really do anything at CES, but just go there and experience it and kind of share just sort of what they were working on. But they heard a rumor that Nintendo had a really, really big announcement, and nobody knew what this announcement could possibly be. Was it a new Mario game? Was it new hardware? Nah, it's probably too soon for new hardware. The Super Nintendo had only been out like a year at this point. They do a lot of speculating in the book. There's kind of a whole back and forth scene where they talk about what it could be. But ultimately, what they decide to do is divide themselves up to attend a bunch of different industry parties that are happening the night of CES to like try and see what they can figure out. So they're going to go out there and do some espionage.
This part is so great. It feels like Ocean's 11-y for some reason.
Yeah, because they're like, we got to figure out what they're doing so that we can try to have like a response to it, right? And they did. They figured it out. Our friend EBVB, Van Buskirk, got info out of a producer at EA that Nintendo was dropping the price of their hardware, of the Super Nintendo, like by a lot, down to $129 with a game or just $99 without. Man, can you imagine consoles being that cheap today? Even if you adjust for inflation, they're still under $300.
That's so cheap, right?
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's like, how much is a PS4 these days? Do they still sell them? I think they still sell them. That's like probably how much.
I'm not sure, but did you see the price hike news with
PS5?
Yeah.
PS5 went up.
50, was it $50 American?
Yeah. $50 around the world. They didn't do it in the United States.
Oh, they're not doing it in the United States?
No, they're not doing it in the United States, just everywhere else.
You know why? Because they know how much the American public would just lose their minds.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, people are already starting to lose their minds, and they're not even affected by it here. Like, game journalists were all about that news a couple days ago.
Yeah.
Everyone was talking about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is big news for everybody else around the world, so.
Yeah, it's lame. I feel bad for people that didn't get one when the price was lower.
Yeah, because they're still hard to get, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to get one, and now I'm like, I'm loving my new graphics card. So, and I mean, the games I wanted to play, they're putting them out on Steam, so maybe I don't need to get one at all.
Yeah, you gotta get that Spider-Man game.
Oh, yeah, man.
I'm excited. Anyway, so this night, after they figured out what Nintendo was doing, they're dropping the price of the Super Nintendo, Kalinske rallied the team this same night after the parties, and they're going to try to figure out what they're doing. Some of them are still drunk. Like, this is like a really late night. Like, let's get it together here and figure out what we're going to do. They wanted to use the hotel's business center, which I guess, do hotels still have business centers? Probably.
Some do. Small town, as someone who does small town hotel travel with comedy sometimes, they do have business centers.
They have like computers and stuff. In 1992, would they have had computers?
Yeah, they would have had a computer and maybe like a really terrible dial-up connection, but the dial-up connection is very...
There was nothing to connect to. There's no internet.
Oh,
I mean, the internet technically exists in like very limited forms, but like it's not. You know what?
Then yeah, they don't even know if they would have had a computer. Maybe they would have. You know what they would have had? Fax machine. That's what it's about. It's a fax machine thing. If it's 1992, that's the timing of this.
Yeah.
Man, I always think the internet's older than it is. And it is. It's just for the first 5-6 years of the internet, it was very much just like a very niche, like colleges.
Yeah.
And government. Did the government use it? I don't even know. It might have just been colleges using it.
Yeah, like email existed for like a while in kind of the 80s and like BBSs and stuff, which is not really the internet. It's like kind of like a quasi proto internet. But the World Wide Web doesn't exist until 1993. Like you surfing the internet, like using the web doesn't exist until 1993, until that comes out with like the Mosaic web browser and stuff. So before that, anything internet is like basically just email or like message boards online. And so nobody used it. Like very few people used it. It's not a thing you would use for work, especially if you're like a big company that already has a work system in place. You're not using the internet for much. And you're certainly not using it to like work like remotely. You know what I mean? Like what would you even do with it? You know?
This is giving me flashbacks to working at a law firm out of college and dealing with a fax machine. That's what this is doing to me. And I hated every moment of it.
Yeah.
Every moment of it.
Yeah. Fax machines, I'm glad they're not really a thing anymore, but they kind of are still for some.
Yeah, it's like legal stuff.
That's so
legal documents, like you have to fax it. And it's like, why can't I just scan it and send it to you? But a fax is more secure, apparently. I don't know.
That's what they say.
That's what they say. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, the business center was closed, so they broke in so they could use it, which I don't know why they don't go to jail, but I guess they do. They don't. So what they're doing, though, is they're putting together their own price drop announcement, and they need to make it look like they didn't just pull an all-nighter to make it happen. So they're like, I don't know what that looks like. They're putting together their plan of like how they're going to tell retailers, I guess, and how they're going to do like the advertising for it, I guess, and putting together their talking points for when they give their presentation on like, hey, we're also dropping our price point. And so they and they have to talk to Sega of Japan, obviously, to get their permission to make sure this is all okay. And it was tough, but they got the permission to drop the price of the Sega Genesis just in time for Nintendo to drop the price on the Super Nintendo, which is absolutely crazy. And they had to make it look like, yeah, we knew this. We were going to do this all along. We didn't just do this because we found out Nintendo was going to do it last night.
Yeah, it's such a weird psychology thing to be like, no, we didn't do it because you're doing it. We did it because we wanted to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. As if anybody cares why you're dropping the price, right?
Yeah, you just can't look reactionary, apparently, in this stage.
Yeah, I guess. I get like, what is even the downside of looking reactionary? I guess you don't really care what like the general public thinks, but maybe you care what your retailers think.
Yeah, it feels like it's more of like for the retailers, and also the whole like you can't show weakness to your business opponent kind of thing. You know what I mean? Even though it's very clear to I think everybody at this time that Sega is the one they've gained a lot of ground, but they are the underdog. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I guess you're right. So that's chapter 30. It kind of goes all over the place. But chapter 31 starts off with Goodby, Berlin, and Silverstein putting together their pitch for the ad campaign. These are the underdog guys that live, that like are near Sega. That the Sega guys are like, maybe someday. We like them a lot, but I don't think they're going to do our ad campaign. But they're putting together a pitch anyway because they wanted to shoot their shot, right? So they're putting it together for Sonic Tuesday and Sega, and they were struggling, at least in the focus groups, because they had made these commercials that were like sort of had bits in them that were meant to convey skill at the games, but they were showing them to kids, and the kids saw right through it. They're like, the gameplay you just showed, we know that's from the second level of the first Sonic, and we know it's not even Sonic 2 that you're showing us. Also, that level's super easy, so we know, like, when you're trying to talk about how good you are at this game and you're showing just the second level of Sonic, like, you're not that good if you only got to the second level, right? That's not skilled play. And they were right. Because it was a bunch of adults putting together an ad campaign. And back in those days, adults didn't really play games. These are like still very much this is still very much toy marketing, right? Like these focus groups are like 10 to 14-year-old boys. And that's like kind of it. That's like the target market for this. And this ad campaign or this ad agency had done a tour of the country playing games with kids and like trying to get a feel for what it's like to be these kids, because they were like trying to build an ad campaign that would speak to these kids. And what they realized was that gaming had kind of become its own subculture, and it was one where like adults weren't allowed. They had their own lingo and their own vibe, so they kind of tried to channel that in their ad campaign. But the kids knew that like when you see something and you're like, it's like, hello fellow kids, those when you get those vibes where you're like, I see what you're trying to do, and like you think you heard a word and you used it wrong, and like you don't get this, and that's a problem in a subculture like gaming. Where authenticity is everything. And I think a lot of subcultures are like that. Whenever you think of any sort of like, I mean, I hesitate to say gamer culture in the 90s as like a counterculture, but like things like punk subculture and stuff like that, like you got to be real. Like authenticity is everything. They can spot posers from a mile away, right? Like, when you watch CSI and you see some like weird hacking scene, you're like, that's not how any of this works. Why this is like, you just sort of roll your eyes at it. That's what was happening to Goodby, Berlin, and Silverstein. They were getting, the kids were rolling their eyes at them. But they had settled on this slogan called "Welcome to the Next Level," which this sort of ended up backfiring in those test groups. So what they learned was that it's all about being cool or being perceived as cool, whatever that means. So it's the 90s, and everything had to be like edgy and cool. And I think that's still the case today. But in the 90s, it was especially like that. Like think of all the commercials of stuff we used to see in the 90s, like that Crossfire commercial, right? It's like, you want to be so cool.
I reference the Crossfire commercial to so many people, and if they don't get it, I'm just like, we're going to have a hard time getting Crossfire. Each other. Yeah, man. That all those 90s Nickelodeon commercials, though, were fantastic. Yep. I know it's like, I'm a kid, and I shouldn't think it's cool. I should be like the teenagers, but I was all in, a young Alaskan child being like, this is the stuff. This is how civilization works.
This is how it works.
Can I go back for a second to the hello fellow kids thing? While it's funny that the teenagers were like making fun of this ad company, doing that intentionally to teenagers is one of the funnest things in the world to do.
Oh, yeah.
Like I get to sometimes chaperone prom with my partner because she's a teacher and I'm working at a school too. And we love just being like, this song's a real bop, This song really slaps. And just watching them all get really upset. It's pretty fun for all.
Oh, just ruining the lingo.
Yeah, it's really great. It's just a good time.
Do you intentionally use it wrong too?
Oh, yeah. Saying like something like not a song is a bop, just being like, hey, this homework assignment's a real bop. You're going to really love this.
It's a real banger.
Yeah.
This homework assignment is fire.
It's pure fire. Oh, this homework assignment slaps. You're going to have a great time.
Oh, man. And like at that age, the kids don't understand that you're doing it on purpose to get a rise out of them too.
Some of them do, which is fun because some of them are getting it and then they're in on the joke with you. So it's like a fun thing. But then some of them are just like, and like roll their eyes in the back of their head. It's pretty great.
That's awesome. So yeah, in the 90s, it was all about being cool. Still is, but it was then too. And Nintendo wasn't cool. And it seemed like they weren't even trying to be. They had hired a company called Foot, Cone, and Belding to be their ad agency.
Sounds fake.
Yeah, sounds like a real fake ad agency. We'll call them FCB from now on. But they didn't really want much from them. They just wanted ads that like showed game footage. They liked their ideas. They had some like cool ideas, like similar to the Goodby, Berlin, and Silverstein folks had for Sega. But Nintendo, like Nintendo of America was usually like, these are cool, but we don't want them, or Nintendo of Japan doesn't want them. They like always had an excuse to like do something different. So FCB was like, this is kind of lame. Can we go somewhere else? Let's go try to be a part of Sega's thing, because they're trying to do this cool thing. So Sega wanted to have them pitch them as well. And because as we all know, Genesis does what Nintendo don't, which is not the slogan that FCB came up with, I don't think. But that was a really good slogan. So FCB came up with a campaign that was all about making your brain sweat. Like that was the tagline, make your brain sweat, for which they wanted to bring in a real brain to the pitch meeting. So side note, the pitch meetings are absolutely insane for all of these like ad campaign pitches. Like it's not just like, let's gather in a conference room and I'm going to show you a PowerPoint of the ad campaign. It's like, no, let's go to this ballroom that we have decked out in whatever the theme is that like we're of the campaign we're trying to do. Like so that you'll pick our ad campaign. This isn't like a place we're going to like invite players to come hang out or something. It's like, we just want Tom Kalinske and his buddies at Sega to pick our ad campaign. So we've done this like massive, crazy presentation it's just, so anyway, they wanted a real brain for their pitch meeting. That's how crazy these pitch meetings are, which is really hard to do. So they settled for a fake Jello brain instead.
Yeah, it's really theater. Like it's total theater to try to like win these people over, which I find so funny. And that's what this whole chapter is. And I kind of loved it though, seeing all the other pitches.
Yeah, this is the kind of stuff that we don't usually hear about in video game history, because we see the ad campaigns that were chosen, right? And we can talk about those for a while. But it's fun to see the ones that weren't chosen and get that sort of inside story, because you know that Blake Harris must have like got this straight from Tom Kalinske. Like, where does this information even exist if not just in Tom Kalinske's brain, right?
Also, just telling making your brain sweat is not good. I don't think it's a very good one. I'm glad
sounds gross.
Spoilers, they didn't choose this one.
Yeah. So they also have this really fun story in here that sort of expanded on about the guy who did the Sega shout. He was apparently extremely sick on the day he recorded the voiceover for that. Sega! They just like throw that little anecdote in there to be like, yeah, he was super sick on that day, but it's like kind of a longer, like it's like a page and a half. You can go read it, I guess. It's interesting that he was sick when they did it. I think they sort of stretched the story out a little bit longer than they needed to.
Yeah, it felt very much like just, here's a little thing we're going to insert in the book right here. Boom. And then it just like switches over back to what we were talking about before with these pitch meetings.
Yeah. So the pitch meeting for Whedon and Kennedy was this like sort of Clockwork Orange thing, like meets gamer culture. They had invented a lingo they called VidSpeak. Have you seen Clockwork Orange?
I have seen Clockwork Orange. It's been a long time. But that movie is like it's weird, obviously.
Super weird.
But it's also very just dark. It's kind of a bummer of a movie. You know, you watch it once and then I feel like, okay, I'm good. You know? Yeah.
But if you haven't seen Clockwork Orange, the big thing about that movie is the way the characters speak, because it takes place, I want to say like near-ish future, but they're their own sort of subculture, and they speak English, but it's like they have their own words for like a lot of things. That's sort of what that movie is famous for.
1984-ish in that way.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. And so they have their own like slang that's like kind of hard to follow until you've like, once you're a little ways into the movie and you've heard a lot of it, like you start to get it, you start to understand. But the beginning of that movie is really tough because you don't know any of the slang. Anyway, the what Whedon and Kennedy did here was they invented like their own sort of Clockwork Orange language called VidSpeak. And I'm going to read to you definitions of some of these words straight out of the book, because this is going to feel like, if you thought fellow kids for Goodby, Berlin, and Silverstein, this is going to make your eyes just like roll right out of your head.
When I saw this in the notes, I got so excited that you pulled these, because I was like, this is the most ridiculous part of this whole chapter.
Yeah. So here, the first word that they define is gearlets. The VidSpeak word for gamers, also known as gamelets, gamies, whoosies, vidiots, speaklets, bossaroos, and cluelets. Bossaroos is my favorite. Where does it come from?
Can you
comes from nowhere.
imagine the disaster of if they had chosen this?
Oh my gosh. And it gets worse. Next word. Hedgy wedgy. Anything pertaining to Sonic the Hedgehog, or to any fan of said Sonic the Hedgehog. That does sound like something that would be said in a Clockwork Orange, though. Hedgy wedgy.
It also sounds like Sonic the Hedgehog is giving you a wedgie.
Yeah, like while he's pulling your underwear up, he's like, "It's a hedgy wedgie."
Yeah, pretty much. That was not included in the movie Sonic 2, but they cut it out.
Yeah, that's a deleted scene. So yeah, anything pertaining to Sonic the Hedgehog or to any fan of said Sonic the Hedgehog. Also, that cute little way Sonic has of stamping his foot when he can't believe you're so slow and stupid. See, slow geezer trying to play the game. Next word, whammy jammy. The way you feel when playing a good game. Next word, gobbledygook. Running wild, running fast, running all over the place without time to say hasta la vista, baby. See Sonic the Hedgehog, gobbledygook. Wow.
Isn't gobbledygook already a word? That's like a definition, isn't it? Right?
I don't know. It's like a colloquial thing that people just sort of say, but yeah, I don't know. Anyway, maybe they invented it. Maybe this is the first use of the word gobbledygook.
I'm tempted to look these up on Urban Dictionary to see if any of them stick, but I also know it would be very tragic if they did. Like, the definitions are not going to be these warm, lighthearted definitions.
Yeah. We have a couple more of these. This one is maybe my favorite. Mobile mover with wings. That's the phrase. What gamers will call the Game Gear. Also referred to as a to-go cup, a Mindorama, home away from home, and a great thing to wrap your nozzles around. Nozzles spelled with a K, Knozzles. Then they don't define nozzles, so I don't know.
It's just so wordy. A mobile mover with wings?
Yeah.
Just say Game Gear.
Yeah.
If anything, they should just shorten it to gear.
Yeah. Gearlets.
That's the word.
That's what gearlets are people that play Game Gears. That's what it should have been.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Or Gearsies? We could have totally fixed this.
Yeah,
if
we could have made this way better.
If I was not 4 years old at the time, I would have fixed this.
Yeah. Next word, Master Blaster. What you do when you start playing the Sega Menacer Master Module, or how to be a real sure shot, full tilt AccuSight kind of guy. I don't get it. I mean, I get it, but I don't.
The Menacer Master Module, is that their like light gun?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, this is just. Also, I just think of Math Blaster when I hear that, and I think of a different game. So that's not a good one.
Yeah. So the last one in the book is the phrase, I was Brahms, Brahms, which is like saying, I was drunk with power, I was mad with passion, I was blitzed with energy, I was actually able to reach the next damn level. That's, I was Brahms.
Where does Brahms come from? Is Brahms a thing?
Great question. I think
about
answer.
Brahmin in a top Brahmin in Fallout.
Top Brahmin.
You know, top Brahmin.
Oh man. So yeah, but Kalinske and his buddies, they loved it, I guess. So they were like set on Whedon and Kennedy. They were like, great, nailed it. No notes. See you next week, right? But there was one more pitch. There was the one from Goodby, Berlin, and Silverstein. That welcome to the next level pitch. Now, if you lived through the 90s, you know that Welcome to the Next Level was indeed the tagline of the Sega Genesis during this time period. So you know how this meeting went.
Thank goodness, too, because if they chose the other ones, this would be a very different book, I think.
Yeah. So they gave their pitch in an elaborately decorated ballroom themed to the pitch. And like I said, these things are all like in elaborate like setups to just for the pitch. Just read the book because they describe it in great detail, and like things are just like crazy, like loud music, huge screens, just anything they need to like set the mood properly before they give this pitch to Sega.
Didn't they stack like a bunch of CRT TVs together to make like a big screen for this one? I think that's what they did in this one.
I think so, yeah. Because it absolutely insane. So GVS explained that they had embedded themselves with gamers, and now they knew them inside and out and how their minds work. This was after the failed focus group things. This is the same company that was doing those focus group things. They figured it out, I guess. They figured out how to make it not feel so fellow kids, I guess. And so they coined the phrase, welcome to the next level, which is explained in the book like this. This is a direct quote from the book. It's a badge of honor. It's the ultimate challenge. It's an invitation to join the revolution. It represents the only thing that a player cares about when he's locked into a game. Shut off the real world, dive into the game world, and just keep going at all costs until you get there. It means wake up and let's get started. Put away your toys, put away that juvenile Nintendo, and go get a Genesis if you want to find out what life is really all about. Welcome to the next level. It means that you have finally arrived, and just in time, because we've been waiting for you. that's a pretty good. I don't know who wrote that. But
that's very Don Draper. That sounds like a Mad Men thing. You know
sure
what I mean?
Does. Yep. And just like that, like all the other pitches melted away. They chose Goodby, Berlin, and Silverstein. And those are the commercials that you can find now if you want to look them up on YouTube. That Sega shout at the end of the commercials, that was GPS, and also that sick guy that did the voiceover. So that ended up happening, which is.
Do you think
sweet.
that sick guy got some more work from that? I hope so.
It's a good question. The story has him asking about a SAG card too. I don't know if he ever got a SAG card. We never find out. Maybe we'll find out what happened to that guy later.
If you don't know, people that listen to the podcast, the SAG, the Screen Actors Guild card thing, is super expensive. As someone who lived in LA and had friends going for this route, it is like $5,000 or something. It's expensive.
And you also have to do things. You can't just like pay your $5,000 and get the card. You have to like have been in productions, and there's like all kinds of rules around what kinds of productions can do it. Because like if it's a SAG production, they like hiring actors that are not part of the union is like a whole process. But if you want to be a SAG actor and you're not in the union, you have to work on a SAG union movie or set, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong here. You probably know more about this than I do. So there's like this weird chicken and egg problem where like they're only allowed to have so many non-union members on their movie, and you have to have been in a union movie to be in the union. So anyway,
it's like it's also difficult. Hard too, because if you don't get enough work after you've paid for it, you can lose it. And that $5,000 is just like gone.
Oof, you know what I mean? I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah, you got it. Like you lose your benefits after like a year. So.
Oh my goodness.
Because I worked for the plans when I was in LA. I don't think this really matters because I don't work for them anymore. It's not like it's an NDA situation. But I was like, my job was data entry to like make sure people had enough money made in a SAG production to be in the union and get the benefits and the sweet pension that you get for being in the actors union. They have a really good pension. Nice. So like when you retire, you make a lot of money on top of what you made. But yeah, it's a big deal. So when they said the SAG card thing, I was kind of laughed because I was like remembering when I first moved to Los Angeles, everyone was like, do you join the union? Do you not join the union? And I'm like, I think you guys are jumping ahead of the fact that none of you are acting yet, you know? Like,
yeah, it's not, that's like, that's not a choice you make until you are able to make it, right?
Yeah, and there were some comics I knew that got like specials and stuff on like TV shows and things. And they were like, do I join the union? And I'm like, I don't know. That is a decision for you to make. And also, are you going to do more acting stuff? Because who knows? You know, you got to do more acting stuff. Otherwise, you'll lose it.
Yeah, and the other thing about it, I could be wrong about this too. We're gonna have some SAG like expert correct us on everything we're saying, but I think if you are part of the union, you can no longer do non-union things.
That is, that is actually, I believe it's true. That is 100% true. You'll get in trouble for like doing a non-union thing.
Yeah, so that's why people are like, should I or shouldn't I? Because like, if you join it and you don't. Like, and then you start getting all these offers for non-union things that you now can't take for the money or the exposure or whatever, right? That's kind of a problem. Anyway.
Also, if I recall, it flip-flops too, where if you, like, because when I was in there, everyone was saying, don't join the union, you know?
Oh, okay.
And like, because there was more non-union work. And then it like flips back and forth between the two. So sorry, this was our Codex history of the SAG-AFTRA union, but that's fine.
Yeah, this is completely unrelated, based off of one sentence in the book where they talk about a SAG card. But you know, I live in Los Angeles. You used to live in Los Angeles. It's a big deal here. So chapter 32, we get a little bit of a look into Sony. Once again, it's a very short chapter. They're still quietly plotting their foray into video games, and they're not sure what they want to do yet. Initially, they didn't want to do hardware. Developing hardware is expensive. It's really risky, and Sony didn't have like a video game presence yet. And they had just recently been roasted at CES when Nintendo announced their partnership with Philips, which, spoilers, doesn't go very well for them. And Ken Kutaragi is feeling a little bit vengeful. Unfortunately, the bigwigs in charge at Sony wouldn't let him continue with the hardware project that he wanted to. And he had already nearly been fired before for secretly working on the sound chip that Nintendo used in the Super Nintendo. That is a Sony sound chip in the Super Nintendo, which is kind of funny when you know eventually how much of a bitter competition Nintendo versus Sony will be in just a few years. But at the time, they made that sound chip, and they made a lot of money making that sound chip. That's part of why they like let it slide when Kutaragi was like, I did this. And they were like, you did what? And he's like, also, I made us a lot of money. And they were like, okay. And then they were like, if you can make that much money doing sound chips, what if you did a whole console? No, we can't do a whole console. But Kutaragi had already started working on that console project in secret. But then we move on to Nintendo in the next chapter, and they really leave us on the cliffhanger here. How about that storytelling?
It's great storytelling. Also, from what I understand, everything I understand, Ken Kutaragi is a terrible person to work for all the stories.
Yes.
But, dude, iron will to do all
Dude
this
gets
stuff.
it done.
Because you believe you're right so hard that you secretly do projects behind your boss's back. I respect it.
Same.
I'm saying. Chapter 33 opens at a party at Minoru Arakawa's house. That is the head of Nintendo of America. And this was his yearly barbecue, by the way. And he has high up executives at Nintendo here. And this barbecue was particularly special because the Seattle Mariners deal had just gone through, and the Major League Baseball agreed to have the Mariners be a team. So the entire investment group was invited, which is pretty big. You know, they're opening up the family as kind of a way to show goodwill.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of nice. We get some other news too. We get a catch up with Gail Tilden, who's been running a Nintendo Power this whole time. And she talks about how there's a lot of struggles going on at the magazine because you're running a magazine that now has to cover 3 consoles, the NES, the SNES, and the Game Boy. Not to mention, Howard Phillips is now gone. So they're trying to smoothly transition that, which is pretty interesting.
The Bowtie Man.
Dude, rip. I feel so bad. I mean, he's still alive, but I mean, from Nintendo.
Yeah.
In other news, also, Nintendo was noticing a comeback on Sega. You know, they were never really down, let's be honest. Mm-hmm. But they could feel Sega kind of chomping at their heels a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And while Sega has more games in the than the SNES library at the time, they have more games for the Genesis than the SNES. The outlook was growing on Nintendo's side because they were getting more and more games that were very, very different from Sega's. So Sega was mostly, and I love this part, by the way, because it kind of breaks down the two philosophies of both companies. Sega was more about quantity and letting the player make the choice. You're not going to like all our games, but I think you're going to like some of these games that we made a ton, right? Whereas Nintendo was all about curation, and we've made a smaller, more quality lineup of games that we think everyone's going to like. And recently, they had just found success with their newest game, The Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past, in May of 1992. And we all know A Link to the Past is an amazing game. There's some really cool side notes about this game, too. But first, I want to talk about something that I never really thought of. So Harris briefly mentions a program that Nintendo tried in the 80s for the Nintendo Disk System. And I've heard of the Nintendo Disk System. It was not successful. It was only in Japan, correct? If I'm say that. Right. But what I didn't realize is they were trying to push for players to buy a disc for a game and then rewrite a new game onto that disc when you're done. Did I remember this correctly from the book? I read this and I was like, wait, what?
I think that was one of the things that you could do. Maybe I could be wrong. This is coming from my memory here, but I think maybe the idea was you would have a disc and you would go to a vending machine and pop that disc in and download a game onto the disc, and then you go play it, and then you would bring that disc back to that vending machine, pop it in, get a different game on there. Ostensibly because if Nintendo can just keep rewriting the same discs over and over again, they never have to manufacture any discs, and it's just pure profit when you go buy a new game and put it on the disc. But I don't know how well that worked out, or if that was even how it ended up working out in the end.
So I think they tried it and it didn't work out. And it seems strange to me that they thought it would work out, because as you're saying as a customer, let's say I'm purchasing Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, right? I play it. I love it. I now have to essentially give that game back to get another game, but I'm paying, in theory, full price for that new game. So it's you're losing a game.
Yeah, maybe it's not full price. Maybe that is the allure too. Where it's
I got to do more research. I read this and I was just kind of stunned for a bit because it's a little tiny paragraph in the book. But then I now want to know way more about this program and why it failed. And I think that's kind of another tangent we can go down on another episode or something.
Yeah.
So, but that's just me. I just was blown away by this idea that because if they are saying, hey, you bought a game from us, now you lose the game to buy a new one. I'm like, that sounds like a terrible deal. Just straight up. Okay, so let's go back to A Link to the Past, though. What I didn't realize is, and Harris makes this point, but I've never felt this way. He says that Zelda titles skew more to an American audience.
Really?
At least that's what he kind of hints at it the book, that Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past was put on hold because it was not as popular in Japan. But I don't, maybe I'm misinterpreting this wrong, but there's a couple things in this chapter that will kind of maybe go, wait, what? So that was said, but the other thing that I didn't know, and this is the fact that is crazy to me, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past was a total of 60,000 programming hours.
Dang.
Yeah. Like, how big was your team? Like, I want to know.
Yeah.
Is that 60 people doing 1,000 hours each? That's pretty nuts.
Well, I mean, if you're working on it 8 hours a day, that's half a year. That's 1,000 hours is roughly 6 months worth of like 8 hours a day, full-time work, 5 days a week.
All right.
So
yeah, I mean, I guess that makes sense. That's just a lot of hours. And I mean, You look at it now, like how big teams are now. It's just probably the difference in team size. So the two other games, though, that were mentioned in Chapter 33 that made Nintendo feel like they were doing something, they're really turning this around, was first, they got exclusive rights from Capcom to release Street Fighter 2. And we all know Street Fighter 2 is a good game. And we also know that Sega really wanted Street Fighter 2. But guess what? Nintendo and Capcom were buds. So that's a situation where Sega just got out because they didn't have that relationship that the other Japanese game developers had, with Nintendo and Capcom. But the other thing, and I would argue they're big up on the Sega Genesis, is they had Super Mario Kart release. And this was not only like a great game, as we all know, but this is the first time that Nintendo got to use the Mode 7 technology to make the game look 3D by rotating and scaling background layers. We'll see this come up later, and we've actually talked about it in episodes. I believe it's in the Ultimate History of Video Games as well. They talk about Mode 7 technology. Is this what Donkey Kong used?
No, it's the, in Super Nintendo games where you see the, like, I mean, Mario Kart is a great example of it, where like it looks sort of 3D, but it's because like the ground is sort of just like rotating underneath you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's Mode 7, is that like rotating and scaling. It's like technically still 2D, but it just looks 3D because of the way they're doing this. Like, it's like not an optical illusion, but it's like a way of tricking this 2D console into doing something that looks like it's 3D.
What was the thing that Donkey Kong Country did?
They did like the digitizing of I guess like that was like more of a like Street Fighter the movie did, like they digitized the real life portraits or pictures of the people in it. But Donkey Kong, they modeled the characters and all of the stuff in like a 3D modeling program, but then they still had that 3D modeling program spit out like a 2D sprite. So it looked like it had been made in a 3D program, because it had been made in a 3D program, but it was technically still 2D.
And then they just animated it and it looks that way. Okay. So that's what was confusing me. Because in my mind, I was like, was that Mode 7 that Donkey Kong Country did? And I was like, it might have been something different. And I knew Tyler would know. That's what I knew.
I got you.
So this chapter ends where it's really just like a happy family barbecue. This chapter's kind of nice. It's pleasant. Everything's like, oh, it's a happy day. Minoru Arakawa keeps trying to get his employees to swim in his pool, and they don't want to do it. But in the end, they finally do. And it's nice. And the big takeaway from this is we see Nintendo as a company that's just a big old happy family. And in the end, it's not about profits. It's more about Nintendo has people that stay at Nintendo for their whole career because they treat people well. So it seems really nice, right? And it's funny that we mentioned that, because in Chapter 34, titled Cops and Robbers, it opens with Tom Kalinske trying to poach Bill White from Nintendo, which is really funny because Bill White wants to stay at Nintendo because they treat people so well. They just talked about how it's a happy family. And this phone call is pretty tense, I think. Kalinske had been trying to poach someone new from Nintendo ever since we heard about the rejection from Howard Phillips in a couple chapters before. And Kalinske has a sense that Bill White is kind of on the fence about staying and that he isn't happy at Nintendo. And he gets this when he says, I'm not interested at moving on at this time. And that's the quote. At this time, he says that. So then Kalinske sees like red and he's like, well, I'm going to go in and stay on this call.
So you're saying there's a chance.
Exactly. It's exactly that. And really, this just seems like a good way to get an update on some previous events happening at both Sega and Nintendo from a narrative standpoint, and that's what we get. So the first thing that's mentioned is Kalinske talks about how his budget is $65 million for their new marketing campaign. He doesn't tell Bill White it's Sonic Tuesday, obviously, but then Bill White counters and says, well, actually, I heard it's only 45 million in the press. And then Kalinske goes, well, I heard that the Super Mario Brothers movie, according to the press, is absolutely a disaster in North Carolina. And then they both are like, well, I guess we shouldn't listen to the press. Ha 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 ha. Like fun business banter, right? But this chapter goes very in depth into the movie Super Mario Brothers. And we've talked about this before. We did a whole episode on it. We did a commentary on this movie. It's pretty well known, but we get a little more context, and I thought it'd be nice to share this. It almost made me wish that we'd have read this part of the book before we did our episode on it, but this is pretty interesting. So Nintendo first gets into films with the Universal Pictures movie The Wizard, starring Fred Savage.
Very popular that movie. Haven't watched it in a while, though.
I haven't watched it in a while either. That would be a fun one to watch as like a video game adjacent movie for the podcast, I think. Because it's not really a video game movie. It's around video games, but it's not about a character. Yeah. Nintendo has a say in how their games are used in the film, but they have no creative control otherwise. Nintendo, when it came to the next movie, specifically with Super Mario Brothers, this is their whole thing, right? They want to have full control. It's their thing. They want to be able to be in control. And this led them to go with indie filmmakers Jake Eberts and Roland Joffe. And it's Joffe. I think it's Joffe. Maybe it's Joffe.
Might be Joffe. I don't know.
Joffe, it might be. And their, quote, serious Mario movie. I'm using very big quotes when I'm using the term serious, by the way. They go through the sequence of events of how this movie became a disaster. I'm going to kind of TLDR it and do it really quick because there's some points to it and there's some pretty funny stuff as well. So first, actor. They got to find their Mario, right? Mm-hmm. And Dustin Hoffman is in. He is interested. Arakawa says no, that he doesn't fit. He had just come off the movie Rain Man. They didn't think it fit.
Great
Danny
movie,
DeVito was offered the role, but he wanted to focus on directing and said, I've never seen Rain Man.
Oh, you should. Great.
I should watch that movie. Okay, sorry. Side tangent. But the third actor they were looking at for Mario is a young, just small-named Tom Hanks. That's right. Tom Hanks was slated to play Mario and then was dropped because he didn't have a, quote, it factor. And the book says right after he loses this role, he does Sleepless in Seattle and like all his big movies and gets Oscars. So you know what? I think Tom Hanks picked the right choice as far as dropping out. And then on the directing side, that moved around as well. Roland Joffe was supposed to direct the movie, and he was hired to direct the movie by Nintendo, and he actually decides he's going to be the producer instead. Okay. So then they hire Greg Beeman, who is a newer director, and they thought he wasn't ready to do a big budget movie, so he's dropped. And then we get Rocky Morton and Annabelle Jankel, who are do the show Max Headroom, and we've talked about them a bit, I think, on the Super Mario Brothers episode. Very out there directors, very zany stuff, really weird things. And they're the ones that make Mario kind of go in this sci-fi direction. So they got to find writers, and the writers are also, to no one's surprise, all over the place. First, the Oscar winner that wrote Rain Man, Barry Morrow, was brought on by Nintendo, but they thought his script was too much about brothers and too similar to Rain Man, so they got rid of it. Then this is probably what the best script was, and this is the script that actually made those actors jump on, was Jim Genuine and Tom S. Parker. They made a script that was supposed to be directed by Greg Beeman that everyone really liked. It was like child-friendly, and it was a modern-day fairy tale, and they ditched that script the minute that Greg Beeman dropped. Then Morton and Jankel were directing, and they wanted something more sci-fi, so they brought in Parker Bennett and Terry Runte, and they had a movie called Mystery Date that was like this teenage movie with a horror twist. And they did some work and made the sci-fi dream that Morton and Jankel wanted. But then they were fired.
Oh my gosh.
So then Dick Clement and Ian LaFrennay finalized this idea, and that made everyone happy. And then we got Bob Hoskins, John Leguizamo. But before the movie starts and before filming starts, they're like, we need to lighten up this script a bit. Nintendo's like, we need to lighten this up, right? Mm-hmm. And those little script changes, the actors hated. Bob Hoskins, John Leguizamo, Dennis Hopper all showed up to film and be like, the script is totally changed. Like, this is not what we signed up for, essentially.
That's frustrating. That would be really frustrating as an actor to show up and like the thing that you thought you were doing is not what's happening.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so what happened was they brought back Parker Bennett and Terry Runte, who, keep in mind, didn't write this script. Dick Clement and Ian LaFrennais wrote the script, but due to scheduling conflicts, they couldn't come back. So they essentially had to like undoctor the script and revert it back to normal, but not the original writers, like the other people that were fired before. It makes no sense. What ended up happening, and this is a direct quote from Harris, is, quote, "The actors weren't talking to the directors weren't talking to the producers, and nobody was talking to Nintendo." There's also a brief moment where they say the producers strictly told the directors they were not allowed to talk to the writers. I don't know if that's true, but it makes no sense.
Yeah,
it seems
that
like,
makes
right?
no sense. Yeah.
Then, on top of it, you have these scandals during the shooting that are very much in the press. Morton, for example, pours hot coffee on an extra because he thinks they don't look dirty enough.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, which is an issue, clearly.
Yeah.
And then Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo, and this is like the well-known fact, I think, from this movie, is they were notoriously drunk on the set because they saw this movie was going to be a disaster. And so they just started drinking a lot during the shooting of this movie, to the point where John Leguizamo crashed a car with him and Bob Hoskins in it that injured Bob Hoskins. He broke his arm. That's why some scenes in the movie he's wearing a cast, but he's not in all the scenes. It's very much a complete mess of a show.
It really is.
In the end, the 10-week production of filming became 15, and they actually still had to cut the ending where Mario drops a Bob-omb down the throat of like a giant King Koopa on the Brooklyn Bridge. Like Mario was supposed to climb the Brooklyn Bridge, drop a Bob-omb down the throat of King Koopa, blow him up in this big spectacle, and they dropped it, and instead Mario just shoots him with a gun.
Oh, that sounds like a better ending.
Way better ending, right? And so that's what's kind of explained, and then they jump back to the phone call, and Kalinske on the call says, if this movie is bad, Nintendo is going to look for a fall guy, and he insinuates to Bill White that fall guy is you. And that's kind of where the call gets really tense. And to try to like lighten the mood, Kalinske says, before we go, can you tell me what Mode 7 is? Like, he wants to know how Mode 7 works. And that's how the chapter ends. I thought this was like a little too much of the movie for me, but I felt like it was fun to talk about this story because I know this movie's like notoriously bad as a bad video game movie, which is why we covered it. And I thought people would want to use some more background. And I definitely jumped over some parts. So if you want to know more about the Mario movie, the Super Mario movie, definitely buy the book and read this chapter because it's pretty great. There's so much going on with this that it's a doozy of a movie. Let me tell you that much. But we'll get back to more console wars next week. Tyler, what you been playing?
I have not been playing a whole lot this week. A little bit more Xenoblade. I've been watching my partner play through the PS5 remaster of Uncharted 4. But that's kind of it. The new season of Destiny started, so I am a little bit back on that. I'm not fully reinvested in Destiny yet, but I have played a couple of times, and I'm trying to keep up on like my weekly story stuff. There's a new raid out, a new old raid, so we got to do that at some point. I'm pretty excited for, so that's like a reason for me to play, but I need to get back into it pretty soon. What about you? What have you been playing?
Well, this is going to be a big shift. So I have not played Destiny at all this week. I kind of completely forgot about it because a friend of mine got a mutual friend into gaming this week. Like, they weren't really a big video gamer. They played Stray, and now they're playing Stardew Valley. And I was like, I gave Stardew Valley a shot. I should give it a shot again. I am addicted to Stardew Valley. I have played 20 hours this week.
Dang.
20. Like, most of my downtime has been playing Stardew Valley. I'm obsessed. I need to stop. I know it's a problem, but I love having an efficient farm. And it makes me excited because, one, like, I never played a Harvest Moon game. If this is what those are like, I should probably like get in on those. But also, the person that created Stardew Valley, because it was a solo indie developer, which is another reason this game is so big, is it's just like, wow, this one guy made this game, he's from Auburn, Washington, which is where I went up. That's where I went to middle school and high school. That's where I graduated high school from. It's where I like yeah, I grew up there, right? So I was just like, this guy in Auburn that's kind of around my age, I think he's like a little younger than me, just started making a game out of college because he couldn't get a job in like software engineering. And he just knocked it out of the park. And this game is so sweet and it's fun. And I love talking to all the characters. And he built this little world that you're encapsulated in. And I'm obsessed. It's like you took Animal Crossing. And I'm going to say it. I just think it's better than Animal Crossing.
Dang. Strong words.
I like that the world doesn't play without you. So, because I'm starting to realize I hate games with FOMO aspects to them. I don't like it. It's kind of frustrated me with Destiny recently, too, is this whole idea like you better play our game or else you're going to miss out. And Animal Crossing kind of has that where you don't play for a month, you come back and your place is covered with weeds and your people are like, where are you? And I'm like, don't try to guilt me, imaginary animal neighbor. Okay.
Yeah. Into playing your video game.
Yeah. And Stardew Valley, it just picks up where you left off on the next day. And I love that. And I love all of the holidays and festival events that have happened. And I'm in winter now, and winter's fun because you kind of can't really farm, so it encourages you to go do other things like fight in the mines or explore. Like I just found a random mine today after unlocking the quarry, and there was like a golden scythe at the end of it. It was really cool. I was like, this is just really cool game design. I feel like I'm just obsessed with updating the community center. Have you ever played Stardew Valley?
Just a little bit, not enough to have to be able to talk about it at all. It's one that I have meant to come back to, though.
Dude, it's stellar. It's a game that I realized, and this might be really strong words from me, if I was stuck on a desert island with one game, it might be Stardew Valley. It feels like this creativity to it and how you build your farm. When you restart a save, when you start a new game, you can pick different farms. So that's like 8 different options there. There's so much replayability to this game, and I'm in love with it. And I'm sure people have played it in our listenership and they're like, oh yeah, no duh, this game's great. And I just didn't have a clue. I bought a poor mobile port of it that was a huge mistake, and I shouldn't have done that because the mobile port is bad. But now that I'm playing it for free on Game Pass, it is so fun. I love it so much. So yeah, that's me gushing over Stardew Valley. I just truly had no idea. I had no clue. Do you want to read just one email today? We've kind of gone a little longer than we thought, which is good. We're having fun talking about Saturday morning cartoons and SAG-AFTRA. So do you want to read Mo's email?
I will read Mo's email. The subject of Mo's email is PC gaming. Hey dudes, it's Mo. First, I'm loving the occasional game of 20 questions. Thanks for squeezing those in every once in a while. It's fun to try to guess along with you guys. Also, wow, winning in 10 questions or less is definitely beast mode. You've both done very well, so I thought I'd send you some challenge questions that you could try sometime. I sent some for Mike and some for Ty in separate emails. Also, definitely have fun with your own rules. Have it your way, as the Burger King once said. And that's true that he sent us our own emails. We've only looked at the ones that were sent. I've looked at the one that was sent for me. Mike has looked at the one that was sent for him.
We've made separate folders so we can't see each other's emails, and we're going on the honor system, and we're not cheating.
Yeah.
And it's fun because Mo not only gave us multiple suggestions, but he gave us difficulty levels for each one, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, same. Mo goes on to say, congrats to the listener from the last episode that is diving into PC gaming. I've been a PC gamer my whole life, and aside from it being absurdly expensive to build a PC right now, it's such a rewarding way to enjoy games. I think you've mentioned a few of these tips on the podcast before, but I wanted to share my usual spiel I give whenever I learn that someone just got a gaming PC. 1. Definitely check out the Steam store sales in summer, fall, and winter. They have some serious discounts. Gaming PCs may be expensive, but at least PCs often have some of the best deals for the games themselves. Check epicgames.com weekly to download their free games. Ever since 2019, Epic has been giving away 1 or 2 free digital games each week. I put a weekly reminder in my phone, and I've been hoarding all of these freebies since day one. I am one greedy spider butt. So far, I've claimed over 240 free games. They used to have some pretty juicy AAA freebies, but lately they've slowed a bit and are offering more indie titles. The next one is humblebundle.com often has some really great bundle deals. I usually at least check out the $1 or $10 bundle options whenever they come out. And last, if you have Amazon Prime, you can link your Twitch account to get some free games each month and also get free access to some Luna games during that month. That's their game streaming, like Google Stadia kind of thing. So that's it. Mo says, thanks for reading. Mozzicone di Ragno, which is Italian for spider butts, I think, Mo. Thanks, Mo.
I love that. I love spider butts in different languages. These are all amazing tips. This is really good stuff. I never even thought, like, I check out the Epic Game Store every once in a while when I remember, but putting an alarm on your phone is genius to do that.
They were doing some really, like, they did GTA 5 at one point. I think Borderlands 3 was just up there relatively recently. They sometimes put some really high profile games up there. I want them to do Final Fantasy 7 remake, but I don't think they will ever.
If they got that, that would be a huge get for them.
Yeah.
Yep. And I like that they go for it, though. They try to get those. Personally, I'm also a big fan of the Humble Bundle as well. Mm-hmm. I recently just got the Humble Bundle for Resident Evil, so I could play that before we do Halloween, so I can talk more about it. It's exciting. I'm gonna jump on that scary game, so you don't have to, Tyler. I was thinking we should play it together, like you could be on a stream with me and you can help
Resident Evil?
Yeah, because it's too spooky. We got to play it as friends do. That's the key.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much for the email, Mo. We really appreciate it, and thank you for those 20 questions games. They're going to be great. I'm super excited for that. We got some more emails to read. We'll hit those next week. It's gone a little long today, which is fine. I'm excited about it. If you want to send us an email, you can send us one at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. You can join our Discord by either emailing me or going to my Twitter page at Mecoletta, MECOLETTA, clicking on the pinned tweet at the top of my profile. That's a link that never expires. Also, Tyler's on Twitter at SneakerElf, ELPH. Talk to him. Talk to him about Saturday morning cartoons and Power Rangers.
True.
And with that, I think that's it for the day. Do you want to tell bye? Do you want to say goodbye to everybody?
Bye, everybody.